Welcome back to New to Medical Device Sales. I am your host, Jacob McLaughlin, and today I have a very good friend who was able to break into medical device sales with one of the largest medical device companies in the world. He is a former student of our New to Medical Device Sales course. He is a former worker for 8 years at Enterprise, and at the young age of 33, I'm proud to show you Wynrick Smothers to the New to Medical Device Sales podcast for officially breaking into medical device sales. Wynrick, welcome to the show.
Thank you, sir. I'm glad to be on it. I really appreciate you having me on, and I'm happy to help in any way I can.
Well, I know you are going to do a lot of that, man, because you have a great story to tell. The thing I would just want to start off with is just who you are as a person, the amount of work you put in. It was so fun to get to watch you put in the work, but also like the success that you had throughout the process, because it wasn't just one company coming at you. You were like, we got on that phone call, it was multiple you were juggling, but it's because you put in the time and the effort. So just to start off, congratulations, because you definitely earned this.
Yeah, thank you, man. It's like I said, when I first got into the course, the main thing was just time. Anyone that works with Enterprise knows, like, especially in my shoes, being a branch manager, that everything's going through me at all times, decision making, managing my team, making, just doing so much at any given time. And finding the time to fully pursue a career in medical device was probably the hardest thing I've ever done. But I had to do it. So here we go.
I love it, man. And yeah, you definitely, the time management piece is big, but again, as you're going to see, and you know this already, it's going to play to your benefit once you get into the industry and once you're rocking and rolling, because there's a lot of that comes in. But Wynrick, can you kind of just tell us a little bit about yourself before you got with Enterprise, a little bit, just who is Wynrick?
Yeah, so I'm a former quarterback for the University of Central Arkansas. So I played sports all my life. Again, I played quarterback. I had an opportunity actually to go to the NFL, but broke my ankle halfway through my senior season. So pretty much ended NFL dreams right at that time. So then once I realized that I really wasn't going to be able to make it to the NFL, I had to join the workforce. My coach's wife was a regional business director at HP. So I took an inside sales rep job just because, just to get into the workforce. Did that for about a year and a half. Really wasn't for me, didn't really work out. My degree is actually in broadcast journalism, and I have a minor in business management. I decided to take up an internship at a local TV station in Little Rock. Did that for about 3 or 4 months, realized again that wasn't for me either, didn't really like it, although it was my major, right? So I then reconnected with a ex-teammate. He was a branch manager for Enterprise at the time, funny enough. Because like, hey man, you're charismatic, you can talk to people. I think you'd be great at this job. I can set you up with an interview. What do you think? So I was like, hey, I got no money coming in. My back's against the wall. I've been volunteering at an internship, getting no money. So why not? So got the interview process with Enterprise, started in Arkansas. Just pretty much never looked back. I'm one of those people that I want to be the top performer in everything that I do, and I want to be the best. Granted, Enterprise wasn't in my cards ideally, but hey, I'm gonna kill it. So and that's what I did, and that's what I wanted to do for 8 years, and here I am.
No, I love it, man. And you got such a good story, because again, I know there's going to be so many athletes that relate to you, right? They've been going and unfortunately they have an injury or something happens. And then what do I do now? And so I just want to hear a little bit like what that was like for you. Of you had goals of going to the NFL. There was the opportunity, and then you got hurt, so you're not able to anymore. That's number one. I would love to hear about just what you kind of went through, because I know there's people who I've talked to, other people who've gone through something similar. So I want to hear what that was like for you, number one. And then also to spin off the back of that is, what was it also like to come out with the major you just spent 4 years of going to school for, and then realizing you don't want to do it anymore? And how you felt in that aspect, because again, that's the common thing I hear with a lot of people is, I just spent 4 years and got this degree. I don't want to do it. Now, what do I do? And it's like, that can be a challenge. So can you just kind of share some light about what those two experiences were like for you when you had to go through those?
Yeah, so just to kind of hit on the first part that you mentioned about, wanting to go to the NFL and getting injured. So I say medical device sales was the hardest. It's up there, right? It was extremely difficult, but any athlete can relate to when you have your whole life dedicated to achieving this one goal. And for me, right, I had no idea that I would be in a position to go to the, like, that never even crossed my mind that I would be talking to NFL coaches and having meetings with them and, like, hey, I'm interested in you. So the fact that that was happening was mind boggling. So of course, right, I start to get excited. I'm like, whoa, I can do this. So, and that was my junior year when I started to have those conversations.
Yep.
Halfway through my senior year, broke my ankle, completely shattered those dreams. So the doctor came in, assessed it, and was like, I don't think you'll ever be able to play football again, at least at this level. So for me, it was already a long shot. So the fact that he told me I wouldn't be able to play at that level again was devastating. I don't think to this day I've cried harder than I've ever cried during that time. My parents were in the room with me. I mean, I just had all these goals and visions of, like everyone, right? I want to buy my mom a house, a car, my dad, take care of him. Like, all those goals just completely shattered. I cried like a baby. So I'm very vulnerable in saying that.
Yeah.
So it was tough. It was definitely tough. And just kind of segueing into the having a major and taking classes for 4 years and then realizing, hey, I don't think this is what I thought it was. So with the major in broadcast journalism, doing that for 4 years and taking up the internship, and, I was volunteering, right? I was driving all around Arkansas, shooting these videos and B-roll and film and everything. And it was like, man, this is not what I thought it was. Because in my mind, I was like, I want to be one of those guys on ESPN that's talking about the game and everything, right? So not thinking that I would have to work my way up to that, right? I'm thinking I'll just magically appear on ESPN. So guys, life does not work that way. So once I realized that, I had nothing at that point. The internship was over. I didn't know what I wanted to do. Back was against the wall. Again, I had absolutely no money coming in. So then again, I connected with the teammate that was a branch manager in Enterprise at the time and was like, hey, I got nothing to lose at this point, so why not? And that's the story.
Yeah, no, and I love that. And I appreciate you sharing that, because again, it is a challenging time. Like, again, I can just sit here and tell you, I played small town basketball, went to a small NAIA school. I was not any good, you guys. I only made it to my freshman year, and then I realized I'm just going to ride the bench, pay a lot of money, and then maybe play my junior or senior year like 5 minutes. The reason I say that, though, is I remember crying my freshman year of, hey, I wasn't going to go anymore. I was quitting basketball because I could just see where the writing on the wall was for me and the amount of money I was paying to actually go and play ball. I got a scholarship, but it didn't cover the whole thing. But that was your identity for so long. And you literally, you have to break up with it. Yeah, exactly. Because like at the time, you were Wynrick, the football player. Like that's who you knew. I was Jacob, the basketball player. Everybody in my town knew me for playing basketball, right? Mm-hmm. And so then when every athlete goes through that, especially once you get into a college level, I think, when that's been your life. But I can sit here and tell you, like, working with professional athletes, I know professional athletes who've stopped and they still haven't broke up with it. They still talk about, hey, I played this year or whatever it is, right? And yeah, and they've never been able to move on from that. So I think it's a blessing and a curse at the same time. It's the curse of like, oh my gosh, my dreams aren't coming true, what I thought. But it's the blessing of like, you had to figure out who Wynrick was without football, which then took you into the journey of like, hey, now you're not making any money. Now you don't even want to do your stuff that you went to college for. But then love that you got into Enterprise, which again, one of the things that I love and I'm so excited to hear about your experience about is that's what everyone says, go do B2B sales experience. And what's one of the first things they say? Enterprise. And so it's really cool to see how it all worked out. But then can you tell us, okay, so you went through that change and that transition for you, but then you got into Enterprise. Yeah. You were there for eight years, because most people are like, oh, just go for a year or two. Like, so you did it, had success, and worked yourself up to a branch manager, having other people under. Can you kind of explain that experience for yourself? Just coming in with no experience, and then now you're in sales, and then working your way up into a B2B sales world?
Yeah. So with Enterprise, they start you off. So everyone loves Enterprise's training program because it's so structured, right? You start off as an MT, then become an MA, then you take this test, and you're eligible to start getting promotions, right? So when you first start, it's very self-driven. It's pretty much on your sales, right? Your ability to sell kind of gets you in the seat to be promoted to become a manager. So I hit the ground running fairly quickly. So I was what they call elite with Enterprise for about the first 8 months, I want to say. But I realized that enterprise was literally nationwide, and I was in Arkansas at the time. So I'm from South Louisiana, right outside New Orleans. I knew I didn't want to live like those years of my life in Arkansas. So I'm like, okay, I want to move. So I moved to Florida, and that's what I thought my last step was going to be. So the beautiful part in that is I had to rebrand myself. I had to reperform all over again, right? And I had to
Yep.
put myself back in a position to be promoted. So I did all those things. Now I reconnect with my now wife who is in Atlanta. So here you go again, right? She doesn't want to move to Florida, so I got to move. I got to move to Atlanta. So here you go. Second time around, I got to rebrand myself. I got to reperform. I got to get back in position to be promoted. So
Yep.
do those things all over again. Get promoted a couple times, and it's like I think throughout that course of managing people. So I was really great at like just kind of performing for myself, but I'm an athlete, right? I've always had the self drive and self motivated. As a quarterback, I was a manager in a way,
Yep.
but we were all driven for the same goal, so the mindsets were kind of the same. I know people in management will understand, like when you manage people that aren't necessarily like minded, it can be pretty difficult. So you don't
Preach it
you don't
one
have
more
people
time, man.
if you don't have people that are like-minded around you and all want to achieve the same goal, it can be tough. So, and I learned that the hard way, I'll be the first to say. So I was unsuccessful a few times with some employees, and it took some self-reflecting, really understand like, hey, maybe this might not be the best route for me. And that's when one of my regular customers kind of told me about medical device sales, and I had no idea, never heard about it. And I was comfortable at the time because keep in mind, I'm still doing well at Enterprise. Like I never dropped my performance.
Yep.
So hey, I told him I would look at it like we all else, and I never looked at it. But luckily he was a regular customer. So he rented at least monthly. So second time around, he's like, "Hey man, did you ever look at it?" I was like, "Yeah, no, I didn't." But I'm like, "Okay, I'll do it for real this time." Second time around, still didn't do it. So third time around, he's like, "Man, you need to look into this. I see how you interact with customers. I see how you handle me. Just please look at it." I was like, "Okay, I will look at it." So I looked at it, did my research, and I was like, "Wow, I would really love to do this."
Yep.
So just to kind of to make a connection, right? So I've had multiple surgeries. So I broke my ankle, I broke my wrist, and I had surgery on kind of my groin area. So oddly enough, I was always interested in how the surgeries worked and like how like I have a plate and 10 screws in my ankle, have a screw in my wrist. I was always the guy that was on a hospital bed, like, hey, how's the surgeon doing this? Like, what is like? I wish I could have been a fly on the wall for my own surgery.
Yes.
As odd as that sounds, right? So I was like, man, I could be in an OR setting, talking to doctors and coaching them on a device. Also, make a great living, have a great lifestyle, and better work-life balance, flexibility, all these other things. Right? I was like, why didn't no one tell me about this years ago? So, did the research, and again, that's ultimately how I learned about you and what you did, and listen to a lot of. I mean, I listened to you for at least a year now, just kind of following your journey and where you've been, and thankfully through a lot of time, effort, and hard work, and finally just landed a role here recently.
Yeah.
I know that's long-winded, but
no, that's so good. And I want to just sit here and tell you a couple of things. Is like, I just always reflect, and I want you guys to hear some of the things that Wynrick said. Is like, number one, rebranding yourself. You did it multiple times, and I've done it multiple times. And like when I personal training, then you come into med device sales. Now I'm in med tech, and now I'm a manager, right? The one thing that I love about what you said, though, you were never scared of it. You always looked for the next challenge, and that's why you were successful. And I think that's one thing I want you all to hear is like, there's a big part of confidence that comes in here when you are trying to go through this process, and you can't be afraid of hard work. And that's why, again, you guys will always hear, why do people love athletes? You want to know what most people know about athletes? They're not afraid of hard work. And let me tell you why. When you have a coach yell at you and scream and say, get on the line, we all know that feeling. We all know the feeling of we don't want to do these sprints, but coach is in a mood or someone made them mad. And guess what? We're doing a bunch of sprints. And guess what? Like there was one time in college, I was one of 3 people who showed up out of a team of 34 people who needed to do library hours. That turned into us, for every hour we didn't show up and do, for as a team, we got to do a suicide for, which if you don't know a suicide, it is free throw back, half court back, other free throw line back, and you have to go to the full court and back. And guess what? You had it timed. And they would be like 30 seconds, 35 seconds. As we got to plus 20, that's when they gave us a little more time. But the reason I'm just saying that is they're not afraid of hard work, and that's when they know about athletes. So I just wanted to state that as number one, is just being able to put in work, and you were never afraid of that. And that's one thing that I really respected about you, Wynrick, is like you've always put in the work and you always showed that. So you are that competitive person. But I also want to make that comment of, you made a really good point of, hey, there's a difference between being a top performer and actually managing other top performers, because this is the very big thing that people think about in sales. And it's why most sales organizations struggle, is because they think just because someone is a top sales rep, they can go teach top sales reps. And the whole conversation is, what makes a top sales rep is because they don't mess with any other people. They're like, for myself, I've had to rebrand myself, and exactly what you're saying, especially after having a couple businesses. Now we have employees, and guess what? I have to understand not everyone's like me. And at first, when I did that, it was hard, right? I always tell people when I was a personal trainer, I couldn't understand why nobody else wanted abs. I was yelling at my mom. I'm like, why are you eating that cookie? And she's like, not everyone wants abs. And I'm like, it just didn't make sense to me. Right. And like, then I had to have the come to Jesus moment of like, yeah, not everyone wants, like, there's different goals for everyone. Right. But the reason I'm saying that is such a good point, because one thing that has helped me be so successful was I was more of a lone wolf. You don't got to hold my hand. You don't got to teach me nothing. I will figure it out. I will be resourceful, and we will get it done. I say that to my CEO all the time. But the reason I'm saying that is, you know what is hard is when you don't have other lone wolves. You have people in sales, but they're not go-getters and killers. And then you're like, I don't understand what goes on in your brain right now. And then you see them slack, and you would never slack. And now you're supposed to be for them to slack. And then you're going to yell at them because they're slacking. And they're like, whoa, bro, like, what's your, you know what I mean? And so I just wanted to state that because that's such a good point. Because again, that's something I've had to learn of, like, going into management and doing this world is like, yeah, you have to do that big transition. And if you don't do that transition, you know, maybe management's not the best spot for you. And that it's just going down to knowing yourself.
Right.
Right. And I think that's something that's big for you, because again, now for you, you're going to work with a team, but you're also going to be back to your lone wolf of like, let me just go perform, and I will get paid on how I perform, not what everyone else I'm telling to do.
Right. Exactly. That. And that can be very difficult for, you know, anyone in a management position, because obviously I was with Enterprise for 8 years. It took me a long time to realize, like, hey, maybe this just isn't for me. Like I've done well. Yes, I've, you know, even to this day, still performing well, but is it best suited for me and my ability and my skill set? It's not. And I had to realize that the hard way. And again, it took me a while, but hey, okay, now that I know, how can I now do this to put me in the best position to be successful?
Bam. And the biggest thing you just said, how do you know? Right? This is what I'll hear so many times. People will be like, oh, you have these skills. Great. But do you enjoy it? Right? Everyone, because like, for example, someone like you and Rick, they can be like, you can do this. You can do whatever you want. You have the skills to do a lot of things, med device or outside med device, right? But what do you enjoy? And I think that's something that we take for granted, or we miss, is like, we take advice from a lot of different people, but then it's like, be careful on the advice you actually take, because do you actually enjoy it? Because I hear this all the time, and I just wanted to touch on this for a second is, you know, everyone knows med device sales, you can make a lot of money and you can do good stuff, right? Like, that is a cool thing. But like, if you only are focused on the money and you don't really care about the actual day-to-day, you're probably going to hate it. Doesn't matter how much money you actually make, right? And so that's the thing, is you got to make sure you're doing it because you enjoy it, you like it, and you got to have goals with it. So I just want to say kudos to you, because again, it's not for everyone. Because I can sit here and tell you, everyone thinks, especially like once you go into entrepreneurship, and we were talking a little bit off air about like, hey, this allows you to run your own business, and then you can have other things that come with that. But the reason I'm just saying that is like, especially if you go into that running your own business, working for someone else, whatever it is, like if you run your own business, you are not, everyone thinks you're your own boss. But like Gary Vee just said it, I watched one of his podcasts. He's like, when you're the boss, everybody else you work for is your boss. Your employees are your boss, because you're there to show up for them. Your customers are your boss, right? And so I think that's what people miss a lot of times. So I just wanted to touch on that, man, because that's such a good point. And now you know, and you're like, hey, this is great. And maybe in the future, it's something you're like, maybe I'll try again. But like, I'll just sit here and tell you guys, there's a lot of people in med device sales who never leave being a rep, they've been reps for 20, 30 years because guess what? They can work way less and make way more money because when you're the manager, you now have 8 people. And guess what? You get paid on those 8 people. And guess what happens if a couple of those 8 people aren't performing? You're not making as much compared to when you just go perform because you know what to do and you have relationships, you can do it. So just something to think about. So I love that. And then you said, you did the research and you found the course. What was it about the course? Because like you said, you did some research, you had talked to some people in it. What was it about the course that made you want to like join and felt like it helped you in your process?
Yeah, so just me, I think just from the background of being a quarterback, I'm big on preparation. So just kind of, if I can get an upper hand on knowing what's to come next, I feel like that's a huge part of it for me. So that was honestly the biggest piece, knowing what I'm getting myself into. Because if you don't know, you don't know. Like you already say, like you always say on your podcast, if you don't know how to play the game, you can't win the game.
Yeah, preach it, baby. One more time.
So I had to learn how to play the game, right? So just having the PDFs and the all of the different content that you provide and knowing, hey, what's this route going to look like? What's this route going to look like? And being able to better prepare myself to, practice my answers or just go over whatever I needed to go over prior to the interview was extremely helpful. So that was the best part for sure.
I love that. And the one thing I just say is like why I'm appreciative of that is because you're also an athlete. And this is what we all know as athletes. We all need coaches, right? Because like think about like the best players, whatever, LeBron James, if you want to go NBA, right? Like he still has a coach. He still works with trainers. He doesn't just tell everyone he knows everything, right? So I think that's one thing that I like because I still have coaches. I have mentors, right? So it's like we're never done learning. And that's one thing that I love about this is like being able to help prep you. But like also, I just want to like bring up our last call a couple of weeks ago when like we talked about this position that you're getting offered and you had a couple other offers about to come as well. And then we really talked out, hey, is this worth it? What's your lifestyle? What's our game plan? And like now we have a game plan for you. This isn't just like, hey, let's do it for ever and let's see what happens. It's like, hey, we're being very strategic. We know what we're doing because we know the life that you want to live and the freedoms that you're looking for. And so that's one thing I just want you all to kind of hear is like, for example, Wynrick, it's not just like, let's just see what happens with life. It's like, no, he's going to go prep. He's going to go put in the work. He's going to go, but he's going to have a plan and understand that there's going to be audibles that they have to call because that's just life. He knows what the overall plan is. It's not, okay, try to break into med device sales, which those people don't break into med device sales when they're just trying to guess. And they actually go put in the work. And then he gets in. Guess what? He's now not going like, oh, I hope it all works out. Like you and I both know it's going to work out. You know what you're going to go do. You're going to go execute. And you and I here very soon are going to be having some fun conversations when you're crushing it and your life's a little different. And that's what the best part about this is.
100%. So like you're saying, just definitely having a plan is one of the big reasons why I took the road that I did is because I felt as if I would be able to gain the most well-rounded knowledge to be able to put myself in a position of the future to be much more successful. So if I want to branch off into multiple different sectors or divisions or whatever, I'll be able to do that just based on what I'm about to learn in the next 12 to 18 months. So that was huge for me because now I'm not going to be able to just specialize, so to speak, in one thing. I can go to this, I can do shoulder, I can do knee, I can do hip, I can do ankle. So all of those different things I'll be able to do just based on the experience that I'm about to gain.
And I love that. And the thing I want you guys to hear, because so many people will hear that and they'll be like, wait, you're not going to be with the same company for 20 years. Here's the conversation. He might be. Like we might be. But for example, when you come in and you're first started out, who you are a year in is not who you are 3 years in. Right. And that's what most people miss. And it's the experience and other opportunities. Like, for example, I'd always just bring this up. You could have never told me that I'd be a regional sales manager running the Western United States with under 2 years experience. That's never in the game plan for me. But like that happened. And it's like, okay, cool. Let's go take, you know what I mean? And so the reason I'm just saying that is like, that's why I love the game plan that you just came up with. Is like, yeah, you might be there in 3 years, but guess what? You're also prepping yourself so you can be the best rounded individual inside this industry because you've made a commitment to make this your career, not just, hey, let me do it for a job once or twice and call it good. And the one thing I just want to touch on that real quick for everyone, because some people will have this rubbed the wrong way. Again, we just had a podcast last week that we talked about like all these companies love you until they don't. Right. And everyone marries companies. And again, we are here. I work for my company because I like the company. The company believes in me, right? Like it's mutual. But what people miss is they're like, oh, I have to marry these companies. And everything they tell me is absolutely true. Because guess what? Let COVID happen again. And you'll find out maybe that it's not as true as you thought because you might not have a job. You have to just understand that it's business. right? And that's how business, you're in sales, you have to understand it. And so I just always put that to you guys because they actually have shown, and just so you know, employers will get very mad for me saying this, but they've actually shown that if you stay in a job longer than 2+ years, you're actually losing money because of what the market is doing. And they actually have a study. I saw it. I saw a video, and it was the people who stay at jobs 2 years or longer on average make half the amount of money as the person who transfers every 2 to 3 years. And so again, this is never me saying, hey guys, go dump your company and do that. But you have to understand what the market is selling, because I can sit here and tell you, if I would have stayed at certain companies and like just in life, like if you stay at a certain company, you might be there for 2 years and guess what? You just got a 10% raise after 2 years. But guess what? You can leave a company and go make a 40% raise just by taking a new position within the same industry. So just something to think about. I'm not going down the rabbit hole, just something for you all to think about as you go in this, because again, that's one thing I hear from, especially the people like my mom and all them are like, and I love them, right? But they're like, I stay for a company for 20 years. And I'm like, great, you've been there for 20 years and you make $5,000 more than you did in 1980. That hasn't caught up to the time. You know what I mean? And they do it. So I just wanted to put that out there. But Wynrick, what did you feel just yourself, right? You went through that interview process. You were going through with multiple companies. What did you feel was some of the biggest things that were your takeaways of like what helped you? And I'm not even saying about the course, just yourself. Like, hey, you did multiple interviews. What was the thing that you took away of like, okay, this is what I really learned about what I always needed to have prep, or hey, this was some of the challenges I faced on a common basis that I needed to keep overcoming. And what was that process like?
Yeah, so I learned quickly that, so like you mentioned earlier in the call, right? People look for employees that come from enterprise, right? But like, so I'm thinking like, yeah, be easy. I come from enterprise. No, it does not work like that. So enterprise is not your traditional B2B, right? You can get B2B experience at enterprise, but it's not your paychecks, your ADP. So it's not the same. So I had to learn that the hard way. Just because, talking to a director and he's like, okay, you go talk to a body shop, you go talk to a dealership. How does that translate to talking to a doctor? I was like, you're right.
They're always going to hit you with it doesn't matter if you have the perfect resume and you have the B2B experience, just so you know, if you're from ADP, they'll still say you didn't talk to a doctor. So that's a great question. So I'm glad you brought that up.
So I was like, hey, yeah, you're right. Right. So going through a number of different interview processes, I then had to learn how am I able to now articulate what I do on a day-to-day, and how does it translate to medical device sales? So that's what I had to figure out. And again, it took a while, right? It took multiple interview processes. It took for me to hear no multiple times in order to be able to, okay, I got to get back to the drawing board. I have to now understand, okay, what do I do? Let me break this down day by day, minute by minute. What do I do? How does this translate? So that's kind of the biggest learning piece for me, because having the ability to articulate what you do and how it translates is key, like major key. And, I had to learn the hard way.
Yep. And that's a great spot, because again, that is, we talk about this, and we actually just talked about it on our office hours last night, is like, you can have the perfect resume, but they're still going to come at you and give you objections. And going back to kind of what we talked about, I've said it a couple of times in the last couple of podcasts, is I saw a video by a guy named Jesse. He's a CEO and he has salespeople, but he talked to his salesperson. The sales guy was like, hey, it was a kind of a tough meeting. And the CEO was like, well, what was tough about it? And he's like, yeah, the person didn't want to buy. And he's like, it is the whole goal of the prospect not to want to buy. You make money in sales because your whole job is to make them want to buy. And like, he was being like pretty like sarcastic about it, but it's like the truth. And so the reason I'm saying that is, it is the whole goal of a med device sales interview to not want you to get hired and tell you why you stink. It is your job as the person trying to get hired to convince everybody why they're wrong, of why you stink and why you're the best person to get hired. And again, it just takes that time and those reps. And like you said, the first time, like even when we prep people, like the first time we do it, when we do like mock interviews and we have some of these people, like I've said it on the podcast, what happens when someone sits here and like that? All right, Wynrick, you have B2B sales experience, but it's not really the same. You go to an actual body shop. That's not talking to a surgeon. So tell me why I would even consider you when we have someone who actually comes from med device sales. If you don't know how to hammer out and knock that question out of the park, guess what's not happening? You're not going to the next stage, right? And they literally do this on purpose. And let me just make this very clear. Like we always talk about, an interview process in med device sales is like no other. I've said this multiple times. You guys have to understand, on average, these companies are going to invest $250,000 to $500,000 in you. because they got to train you. They have to know that they're going to lose money on you. They're going to send you to training. They're going to pay you a nice income, and then they're going to get you all your benefits. And then they know you're probably not going to perform for the next 6 months, maybe 12. And so they're investing all this time and money into you. So they got to make sure the person that they're getting is when they get yelled at by a doctor or a nurse or someone's not the nicest person to them, that they're not going to cry and be like, oh my gosh, this is a lot. Like, they can't be that. It's got to be like, all right, here we go. This is what I signed up for, right? So I just wanted to state that because you're dead on of where it's like, yeah, it can be an absolute uphill battle, but it's, again, why you continue to be successful, because you're not afraid to rebrand yourself. You're not afraid. You see the hill and you're like, let's go take the hill, right? So
let's do it. Let's go win.
I love that, man. And I always love to end with this question is, there's going to be people who reach out, and there's going to be a lot of people, I think, who relate with you of AKA an athlete being able to go make that transition, but then also somebody who maybe was in that B2B sales experience that's still struggling, right? Because everyone, like you just said, I get so many people who are like, oh, I work at ADP or I work at Paychex or Cintas or Enterprise, so I'm just going to go figure it out. And it's like, all right, I'll probably hear from you in about 3 to 6 months, but good luck. I hope it works out. What's your advice to people with sales experience and without sales experience to try to break into medical device sales?
Yeah. So with sales experience, I would say just being able to really understand, your own sales process, being able to explain it. And also, of course, same like I was just mentioning, how does it translate to medical device sales? So really being an expert at articulating that. Also for people without sales experience, I would say just aggressive networking and be able to sell yourself. That's going to be, that's sales in general, right? People buy from people they like. That's sales. So you got to be able to network aggressively, build a brand for yourself, build a name for yourself, and be consistent. Like coming from someone like me, right? I wake up, 5:30 in the morning. I'm at work from 6:30 to pretty much 6:30 at night. Again, the hardest part for me was the time. Like I could not figure it out, but I had to have a conversation with myself. I was like, I don't have a choice. I have to figure this out. If I want to make this move, I have to figure it out. So it was late nights. It was early mornings. It was, cutting out TV, cutting out weekend stuff, just preparing. And if you do that for a long enough time, it'll work out.
Come on, baby. This is what I want you guys to hear, because you've said this multiple times and it's why you've been successful. Short-term sacrifice leads to long-term success. Yeah. It's not like that forever, right? It's not going to be cutting out TV and all the long weekends forever, but it might be 3-6 months and it might be uncomfortable. But if you can do that, it's worth it. And let me just sit here and tell you, it's why 99.9% of people are never successful and don't accomplish the dreams that they want, because they can't even do one weekend of sacrifice and put in the work because they'd rather go out with their buddies drinking or whatever it is. And that's why you've been so successful, as you've said it multiple times, but you're okay with that sacrifice and you put in the work. And I just want to compliment you again, man, because I am so proud of you watching just what you've done in this short amount of time. And now that you're in med device sales, and like we said, this is just the beginning. I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, congratulations, because it's why we do what we do, and love absolutely seeing people have success.
Absolutely, man. I really I'm looking forward to it so much. The downside is my start date is until March 4th. So like I still got the rest of February. February just started. So
hey man, this is what I'll sit here and tell you. Enjoy your time off, because once it gets rocking and rolling, you're gonna wish you went back to February for a second. So
I know it. I'm excited. I'm super excited. I can't wait to get in and hit the ground running. Like my goal is to get in and be successful and crush it as quickly as possible. Just, soaking up as much knowledge and just being a value add as best as possible. And hey, and we'll see where that takes me.
Oh, and I have no doubt it's going to take you very well. And where can they find you on LinkedIn?
Yeah, so my name is very unique. So Wynrick Smothers, Wynrick. I'm not really on any other social media. I felt like social media was kind of taken away from like my productivity in life. So LinkedIn is pretty much where I am mainly. So you can find me there.
I love it. And if you guys do reach out, please just make sure you come prepared. Please don't just like, we talk about this, and I always have to call the people out who watch every episode. They'll hit you up within the first 12 hours, but they're not actually doing the work. They just want to have you. They'll be like, I don't want to take a course. I don't want to do anything. Just please give me all the answers. Here's the best part. We're giving you the answers. Network, work hard, do all the stuff, but most people just can't do it the right way. And then they don't put in all the work and the time and stick with it long enough. But please just come prepared. And the last thing I always tell, because we always like to joke around, but it is absolute truth. Please don't be a creep if you do reach out to Wynrick. We don't need any of those. So absolutely appreciate your time today, man. I'm so proud of you. And again, from the bottom of my heart, congratulations on breaking into med device sales.
Thank you so much. I wish everyone else listening and watching, wish the best to you guys, and you all make it to medical device sales too. Just work hard, you'll get there.
Love it. And if you guys can, press that like and subscribe button. If a 5-star review does help us grow this channel. If you guys are really serious about breaking into medical device sales, our average person in 2023 and currently is breaking in 8.2 weeks at $94,478. We are so proud of the program that we have to have great people like Wynrick go through and now be in their dream of medical device sales. So you guys can click the link below or reach out to us on LinkedIn at Jacob McLaughlin or New to Medical Device Sales. But until next time, keep working hard, going after your dreams, and we'll see you on the next one. Peace.